The silver tray trembled in my hands, though I tried to disguise it with a careful grip. Rows of champagne glasses glittered like fragile soldiers waiting for the slightest mistake to send them crashing. Around me, the ballroom of the Harrington Hotel was alive with light laughter and lies. Crystal chandeliers burned above the crowd, their glow mirrored in every glass and diamond. A quartet played at the far end, strings sharp and perfect, filling the air with music that didn't touch me at all. I wasn't a guest. I was part of the furniture. My uniform was black, my smile stitched on my shoes half a size too small. A maid. That was all. Guests brushed past me as though I were invisible unless their glass was empty, unless they wanted something filled, unless they needed a hand to remind them they were important enough to be served. "Top it up," a woman ordered, tapping her empty flute with one nail. Her emerald dress clung like liquid, her diamonds brighter than her eyes. I poured, steady, silent. She never looked at my face. She never needed to. Her necklace alone could have paid for my mother's medication for months. I lowered my gaze, moved on. The scent of truffles, perfume, and expensive whiskey clung to the air. Voices overlapped, deals made in whispers, promises in laughter. I slid through them all. Tray balanced shoulders tight until the double doors to the terrace opened. A sweep of winter air rushed in. I stepped outside because I needed to breathe just once, just long enough to remind myself that the world was bigger than this ballroom. The city stretched below endless blocks of lights, the river cutting black and sharp between. My breath rose white in the cold. For 5 seconds, I let myself feel it. Space. Freedom. Silence. Then a voice cut through the air. "Shouldn't you be working?" I spun. The tray almost tipped. In the corner of the terrace, half hidden in shadow, stood a man. Smoke curled from the cigarette between his fingers. The ember burned a steady red, then vanished into the night. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of figure that pulled space into orbit. A black suit that looked made for him. Dark hair swept back precise. A scar traced across his cheekbone, pale against his skin, not ruining his face but making it sharper, crueler. "I am working," I said when I found my voice. "Right now I'm working on not collapsing." His head tilted, the smoke drifting like a question. "And how is that going?" "Not great," I admitted. I hated that he could see me shiver. "Do you want champagne?" He studied me, then his eyes dark and unreadable, and it felt like he weighed my soul on some private scale. "No." Champagne lies. Whiskey tells the truth. I should have walked away. I should have remembered the rules: no conversation, no hesitation, no wandering. But something in the way he stood there so still, so certain, kept me rooted. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mara," I said too quickly. "Mara Flynn." "Mara Flynn," he repeated the syllables heavier in his mouth. His accent was European, not lazy, but deliberate, controlled. He crushed the cigarette against the stone ledge, his movements exact. "You should go back inside. Someone will notice you're gone." "They never do," I whispered. He glanced at me, the faintest twitch at his mouth, then turned and walked back through the doors. The music and heat swallowed him whole, and I was left gripping the tray like it might save me. Inside, the ballroom felt hotter than before. I returned to my station near the velvet ropes of the VIP platform, where the city's richest pretended not to flaunt their power. The reserve bottles gleamed in ice buckets, their labels discreet, but their worth obscene. I poured, smiled, bowed my head. Wrist tilt, pour. Smile. Again and again. At the central table, a man reached for his glass. Heavy rings flashed under the chandelier. He didn't look at me until he felt something unusual. My steady hands, my silence. His eyes flicked up sharp and cold, then slid away. Not at me, past me, toward someone approaching. The air shifted. It wasn't loud, but I felt it like a pause between heartbeats. I looked. The man from the terrace was crossing the ballroom. He didn't need a path. The velvet ropes opened as if the air itself moved for him. Guards straightened. Hosts bowed their heads. He walked as though every step had already been decided. He leaned toward the event coordinator in navy silk, the one who had scolded me earlier for breathing too close to the orchids. His lips moved. Her eyes shot to me. Her smile froze, then softened into obedience. She turned to a guard, and with a voice smooth enough to glide over marble, said, "That one? Bring her to me." The words cut through me sharper than any shout. I tried to pretend I hadn't heard, but the guard was already moving. "Miss," he said, polite, unyielding, "Ms. Corbin requires you." I set the tray down carefully as if the balance of my life depended on it. Maybe it did. The guard's hand guided me through the ropes past eyes that watched without watching. The coordinator's pearls gleamed at her throat. She lowered her voice so no one else would hear. "He asked for you. You'll be reassigned for the evening. Keep quiet. Smile. Do exactly as told." Understood. "Yes," I whispered. The guard opened a path, and I followed. The man, this stranger with a scar and a voice like command itself, didn't look at me, not directly, but I felt the weight of his choice pressing against me heavier than any tray I had ever carried. The music played on, the laughter rose, and somewhere inside me something shifted like the first stone dislodged in an avalanche. The guard's hand never touched me, but the space he created was enough. Guests shifted aside as though the air itself had changed their laughter, thinning into polite silence. I followed my breath, shallow my steps too loud against the polished floor. I tried to count the beats of the quartet's music to calm myself, but even that rhythm broke when I realized where we were heading. Toward him. The man with the scar, Cassian Vale, I would later learn stood at the far side of the ballroom, watching the crowd with the calm of someone who owned the floor beneath his feet. He didn't glance up as we approached, not until the guard stopped just short of him and inclined his head. Then those eyes turned to me, and the rest of the room faded. Close, he was worse. His suit looked effortless, but I knew it cost more than my yearly rent. His presence was not loud, not even imposing in the obvious sense, but absolute, as if gravity answered to him before it answered to the earth. "This one," Ms. Corbin murmured at his side, her practiced smile stiff. "As you requested." Cassian Vale's gaze stayed on me, silent, unreadable. For a moment I wondered if he would dismiss me with the same disinterest the others did. Instead, his voice came low, smooth, final. "She stays." The guard nodded and stepped back. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wanted to ask what he meant, but my tongue clung to the roof of my mouth. Instead, I waited, the tray of glasses gone, my hands strangely empty. A woman in crimson silk drifted near her, perfume sweet and sharp. I recognized her, the one who had snarled at me when champagne spilled earlier. Her smile now was brittle, stretched thin. "Mr. Vale," she purred, touching his sleeve. "It's been far too long." He acknowledged her with the barest nod, nothing more. Her smile faltered. She glanced at me, her expression tightening with silent question. "Who is she? Why is she standing here?" Cassian's reply was simple. He turned to the coordinator. "Have her reassigned to me for the evening. Drink service, whatever is required. She answers only to me." The words sealed around me like iron. Ms. Corbin forced another smile and dipped her head. "Of course." The crimson woman's eyes narrowed. She said nothing, but the air between us grew sharp with unspoken malice. I lowered my gaze, wishing myself invisible again. "Follow," Cassian said. He moved through the ballroom without looking back, and I had no choice but to follow. The crowd parted for him, their conversations pausing, then resuming with forced brightness. I walked half a step behind my heart, tripping over itself, every nerve aware that I was being watched, not by him, but by everyone else, who wondered why a maid in a plain black uniform had been chosen. We reached a side corridor, quieter, lined with portraits of dead benefactors. The music dulled behind us, replaced by the muted thrum of the building itself. A service elevator waited at the end doors, already open, as if someone had anticipated his arrival. Inside, the mirrored walls threw our reflections back at me. I looked small, out of place, my bun crooked, my cheeks flushed. He stood still, his posture precise. Hands at his sides. The doors slid shut. The car hummed upward. I forced myself to breathe. The silence pressed heavy until I blurted, "Why me?" His eyes flicked to mine in the glass, then away. "Because you don't look at me the way the others do." I swallowed, unsure whether that was praise or condemnation. And how do they look at you like they already know the answer to every question? His voice was flat, but edged. "You, Mara Flynn, you ask before you decide." The elevator stopped. The doors opened to a private floor carpet thick enough to smother sound. Guards stood like statues at either end of the hall. None spoke as we passed. At the far door, a woman in slate gray waited, a leather folio clutched to her chest. Her hair was silver at the temples, her expression carved from steel. "Mr. Vale," she said. "Your schedule." 3 minutes, he interrupted. She dipped her head and vanished through another door, leaving us alone in the corridor. He unlocked the suite with a key card, then held the door for me to enter first. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But I stepped inside. The suite was unlike anything I'd ever seen. High ceilings, velvet drapes, shelves of leather-bound books that looked untouched. A fireplace flickered in the corner, though it was electric, not wood. The air smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. On the table near the window sat 2 crystal tumblers and a decanter of amber liquid. "Pour," he said. I crossed the room, hands steady only by force of will. I filled one glass, then another, setting them before him. He gestured to the opposite chair. "Sit." I froze. "Sir, I'm not—" "Sit," he repeated, and this time it wasn't a suggestion. The chair swallowed me plush and heavy. He studied me for a moment, then took his glass. "You've been working here long?" 3 months, I said. My voice sounded small in the expanse of the suite, and before that I shifted. Waitressing, anywhere that would pay. His gaze sharpened, and I felt stripped bare. Why stay in it if it barely covers your life? Because my mother's medicine costs more than my rent. Because debt collectors don't wait for kindness. Because I don't have choices. I didn't say any of that. I forced a smile. It's work. That's enough. His eyes lingered like he could see the lie behind my lips. Not enough, he murmured almost to himself. Before I could reply, the door opened. The silver-haired woman reappeared. Mr. Vale, the attorneys are waiting. He stood leaving his untouched glass behind. Mara stays here. Wait, don't move. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving me alone in the silence of a room that didn't belong to me, surrounded by wealth I could never touch. My pulse raced. My fingers trembled in my lap. What did he want from me? Why me, out of every face in that glittering crowd I didn't know? But I knew this the moment his eyes had found me on that terrace. My life had already begun to shift, sliding into a story I didn't yet understand, one that would not let me go. The silence of the suite pressed against me like a second skin. I sat where Cassian Vale had left me the untouched glass of whiskey glinting in the dim light, daring me to lift it. My hands stayed folded in my lap, stiff, obedient, because I knew one thing with certainty: every inch of this place was a trap, velvet-lined and quiet, but a trap all the same. The clock on the mantel ticked. Each second stretched too long, too loud. I stared at the bookshelves, rows of spines whose titles I couldn't make out. They were props, I thought, for men who wanted the illusion of culture, the kind of men who built empires from shadows. I shifted in the chair. The cushions swallowed me deeper, as if to remind me this wasn't my world. Outside the window the city sprawled, glittering with thousands of lives, none of them mine. My breath fogged the glass when I leaned forward, trying to see something ordinary, something grounding an old taxi sputtering below a man dragging his coat tighter against the wind. Then the sound of a lock. The door opened. Not him. A young man entered, maybe mid-20s, lean with sharp features and a guarded expression. His suit was immaculate, but the way his eyes swept the room first, then settled on me, told me he wasn't here for drinks or small talk. He shut the door softly behind him. "You're Mara Flynn," he said. Not a question. I stiffened. "Who's asking?" He almost smiled. "Elias, Mr. Vale's assistant. Or one of them, anyway." He crossed the room with quiet steps more graceful than most men in suits. He didn't sit. He leaned against the table, arms folded. "You must be wondering why you're here." I let out a shaky laugh. What gave it away? "Most people don't get summoned," he said. His eyes narrowed, studying me like a puzzle. And when they do, they don't come back unchanged. That sent a chill through me. Summoned for what? He tilted his head. "That depends. Sometimes business, sometimes a test." I frowned. A test for what? Before he could answer, the door opened again. Cassian Vale returned, moving like time itself bent around him. Elias straightened immediately, the subtle shift of a man who knew exactly where he stood in the order of things. "Out," Cassian said, without looking at him. Elias dipped his head, then brushed past me silent as a shadow. The door clicked shut, and once again I was alone with Cassian Vale. He poured himself a fresh glass of whiskey this time, then leaned against the mantel, not sitting, not relaxing, only existing in that poised, deliberate way that set my nerves on edge. "What did Elias tell you?" "Not much," I admitted, "only that people don't come back unchanged." A faint hum of amusement touched his lips. "He has a dramatic streak." He lifted the glass, sipped, then set it aside. "But he's not wrong." The words hung there heavy, dangerous. I clasped my hands tighter. "What do you want from me?" He studied me for a long moment, and the weight of that gaze made me feel stripped bare. Every secret laid out under the heat of it. Finally, he said, "I want to know if you can keep your composure when the floor beneath you shifts, if you can walk into a room of wolves and not show your throat." My laugh cracked. "I'm a maid. I carry trays." "That's it." He shook his head once slow. "That's not it. I watched you tonight. You don't shrink the way the others do. You don't scramble for attention, and you don't flinch when power brushes against you." "You don't know me," I said, but my voice wavered. "I know enough." The silence stretched again. This time I couldn't look away. Something in his eyes, dark, unreadable, but not entirely cruel, pulled me in. The kind of gaze that promised ruin and reason all at once. Then without warning, he shifted. "You live with your mother." The words sliced through me. My chest tightened. "How do you—" He cut me off. "I make it my business to know who works under my roof. Your mother's treatments are expensive. Immunotherapy, the kind that insurance won't cover. You've been working doubles to keep pace with the debt." Shame and fury tangled in my throat. "You had no right. I had every right," he said sharply. Then softer, "I don't deal in chance. Not with people, not with money, not with loyalty." I forced myself to breathe, to hold his gaze. "And what am I supposed to be loyal?" He stepped closer, each movement deliberate. The air shifted, thickened. "You could be useful, more than carrying trays, more than vanishing into the background." My pulse hammered. "Useful how?" Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket, drew out a slim envelope, and set it on the table between us. 2 weeks' wages. Consider it a retainer. I stared at it, the edges crisp, the paper heavy like it weighed more than money ever should. For what? His smile was thin. "For your silence. For now." Heat rushed to my face. I stood the chair, scraping against the rug. "You think you can buy me?" His eyes didn't flicker. "Everyone can be bought. The question is the price." I shook my head, my hands trembling. "You don't know me." He leaned closer, his voice low, almost a whisper. "But I will." The door opened again. Elias appeared precise as a clock. "Sir, they're ready for you downstairs." Cassian didn't break his gaze from mine as he straightened. "Mara stays. She'll be escorted when I'm finished." Then he was gone once more, Elias closing the door behind him. I sank back into the chair, my breath ragged. The envelope still sat on the table, a silent threat, a silent promise. And for the first time that night, I realized the truth. I wasn't invisible anymore. I had been chosen, and whatever that meant, it would change everything. The envelope sat on the table like a loaded weapon. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. though my eyes kept darting back, drawn to the weight of what it represented. Money power chains disguised as paper. The suite was silent again, the fire humming softly, shadows thick against the velvet drapes. I pressed my hands to my knees to stop them from shaking, but the tremor lingered restless and hungry. Minutes stretched into hours. At least it felt that way. I counted the ticks of the mantel clock until I lost track. Every sound outside, the echo of footsteps in the corridor, the muffled hum of the elevator, set my nerves sparking. I didn't belong here. Every breath was trespass. Finally, the door opened. Elias returned. His expression gave away nothing, but his eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me. "You didn't touch it," he said. "No." He stepped further in, closing the door with a soft click. Most would have. That much cash sitting in the open temptation is stronger than pride. "Maybe I'm stubborn," I murmured. His mouth quirked. "Or maybe you're smarter than you look." I bristled. "What does that mean?" Elias leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "It means you're not here by accident. He doesn't choose lightly. If he called you in, there's a reason, whether you like it or not." I shook my head, rising from the chair. "I didn't ask for this. I just work here. I don't want anything from him." "That's the problem," Elias said, his tone sharper now. "You think this is about what you want. It never is. It's about what he wants. And once he's decided." He let the words trail off the silence, more threatening than anything else. I crossed the room, my fingers brushing the cool glass of the window. The city lights blurred through the pane, dizzy and distant. Why me? Elias studied me, his expression unreadable. Maybe he sees something in you. Maybe he sees nothing at all and just wants to test you until you break. Either way, you're in it now. The door opened before I could reply. Cassian Vale stepped in the shift in the room immediate, as though the air thickened with his presence. Elias straightened, bowing his head slightly. "Leave us," Cassian said. Elias slipped out, his eyes flicking to mine once more, as if in warning, then he was gone. Cassian crossed to the table, picked up the envelope, and weighed it in his hand before tucking it back into his jacket. Not tempted. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Good," he replied. "Temptation is easy, discipline is rare." I swallowed. "Why am I here?" He poured another measure of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the firelight. He didn't drink, only held the glass loosely as he turned toward me. "Because I want to see if you'll stay when you have every reason to run." "I should go," I whispered. "But you haven't," he said simply. "And that tells me more than anything else could." I opened my mouth, closed it again. He was right. I hadn't left even when the chance was there. Something had rooted me to this place, to him, though I didn't want to name it. Cassian set the glass down untouched. He walked closer, slow measured until he stood a breath away. His height swallowed the space between us. His gaze sharp enough to cut. "You don't scare easy," he murmured. "You don't know me," I shot back. His eyes glinted, dangerous. "Not yet." The door burst open before I could reply. A man I didn't recognize stumbled in, out of breath, his face pale. He wore a suit, but sweat had ruined the press of it. "Mr. Vale," he gasped. "They're waiting downstairs. It's urgent." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Handle it. They said it can't wait." The man's voice cracked. "It's the investors. If you don't show now." Cassian's expression didn't change, but the air around him shifted. He turned to me, his voice low, certain. "Stay here. Don't leave until I return. No matter who comes through that door. Understand?" I nodded, throat dry. Without another word, he strode out, the nervous man trailing in his wake. The door shut hard behind them. I sank back into the chair, my pulse racing. The silence that followed was heavier than before, filled with shadows that seemed to breathe. The minutes crawled by again, each one louder than the last. I thought about leaving, about slipping out before anyone noticed, but his command echoed in my head. "Don't leave, no matter who comes through that door." The handle turned. I froze. The door opened slowly, not Cassian this time, but someone else. A woman stepped inside, tall, elegant, her gown midnight blue. Her hair was dark, pinned perfectly, her lips painted like blood. She closed the door behind her, the click deliberate. "Well," she said softly, her accent lilting, unfamiliar. "So, you're the girl who's caught his eye?" Her gaze swept me from head to toe, sharp and cold. She crossed the room with the easy grace of someone who belonged here unlike me. She stopped at the table, poured herself a glass of whiskey without asking, and sipped. "I don't know what you mean," I said, my voice too thin. Her laugh was quiet, cruel. "Of course you don't. They never do at first." She set the glass down, leaning close enough that I caught the scent of her perfume, jasmine smoke danger. "Do yourself a favor, little maid. Walk away before you're in too deep." My heart pounded, but I forced the words out. "I can't." Her smile curved like a blade. "Then I'll enjoy watching you drown." The door opened again, and just like that, she was gone, gliding into the hall as though she'd never been there at all. I sat frozen, her words lingering like poison in the air. And for the first time I realized something terrifying. Cassian Vale wasn't the only one watching me. The door closed, and silence swallowed the room once more. My hands trembled against the fabric of my uniform fingertips, pressing crescent moons into my palms. I kept waiting for the sound of her heels echoing back down the hall, proof she was truly gone. But nothing came, only the clock's patient ticking and the faint hum of the fire. Her words clung to me like smoke. "Walk away before you're in too deep." I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was just a maid, that I'd return to the kitchen, to the trays and dishes, and this night would fade into a strange story I'd never tell. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I couldn't walk away. Not anymore. The handle clicked again. I jolted upright, bracing for her return. Instead, it was Elias. He slipped in quietly, his sharp eyes sweeping the room, landing on me. "You're still here," he said, almost surprised. "Where else would I be?" My voice cracked more than I wanted. His gaze narrowed, noticing. Someone came. I hesitated. A woman? He stilled, then cursed softly under his breath. Tall, dark hair, blue dress. I nodded. Elias muttered something I couldn't catch. Then more sharply, "Did she say anything to you?" I swallowed. "Only that I should leave. That I'd drown if I stayed." His jaw tightened. He crossed the room in 2 strides, shutting the door harder than before. "You can't listen to her. Not a word." "Why? Who is she?" For a moment, he didn't answer. His hands pressed flat against the table shoulders, rigid. Finally, he looked at me, his voice low. "Her name doesn't matter. What matters is she doesn't want you here. And if she doesn't want you here, it means you're exactly where you need to be." The words only deepened the knot in my stomach. "You're not making sense." "You don't need sense," Elias said, his tone sharp now, commanding. "You need instinct. If you want to survive around him, you listen to instinct, not warnings dressed as kindness. Survive." I repeated the word sour on my tongue. He looked away. "Forget I said that." The door opened again. Both of us straightened. This time it was Cassian Vale. The room shifted instantly. Elias bowed his head and retreated to the wall, leaving the space open for him. Cassian didn't speak at first. He studied me, his eyes flicking once to Elias, then back. "She came," he said flatly. "Not a question." "Yes," I whispered. His jaw tightened. He poured himself another whiskey, downed it in one swallow, then set the glass down harder than before. The sound cracked through the room. "You're not to listen to her," he said. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried the weight of steel. "Do you understand me?" "Yes." His eyes searched mine as if testing for cracks. "Say it again." "I understand." Only then did he nod. He paced toward the window, the city lights painting his silhouette in gold and shadow. "She doesn't like when I make choices without her approval. But I don't ask for approval. Ever." I stayed still, unsure if he was speaking to me or to himself. Finally he turned. "You'll start tomorrow." My breath caught. "Start what you'll work for me. Directly. Not the hotel. Not the staff downstairs. Me." I froze. "I can't." "You can," he cut in, voice absolute. "And you will. You'll assist with my household, my schedule. You'll stay on the estate." My chest tightened. "Live there." He stepped closer, his presence filling the space. "Yes, and in return, your mother's treatments will be covered. No debt, no collectors, no fear of choosing between medicine and food." My knees weakened. "Why?" He tilted his head. "Because I need someone I can trust. You don't know me. I know enough." His voice dropped lower, sharper. "And I'll know the rest soon." The weight of his words pressed into me until I could barely breathe. Elias shifted at the wall as though ready to intervene, but Cassian's gaze pinned me in place. "Think carefully," he said. "But not too long. Some offers don't wait." He turned then, signaling to Elias with a flick of his hand. "See her out. Safely." And just like that, he was gone again, vanishing into some other chamber of the suite, leaving me trembling in the silence of my own thoughts. Elias moved toward me slowly. His expression was calmer now, almost sympathetic. He doesn't ask. He decides. That was as close to asking as you'll ever get. I tried to laugh, but the sound broke. "Is this a choice, or a cage?" Both, Elias said simply. "That's what makes it dangerous." The hall outside was quieter than before, the guards still posted like statues. Elias led me to the service elevator, pressing the button without a word. When the doors closed around us, I finally spoke. "What happens if I say no?" He studied me through the mirrored walls. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you said yes." The elevator hummed downward. My reflection looked pale, drawn someone I barely recognized. The doors opened onto the kitchen floor again, where the clatter of dishes and the hiss of steam felt almost obscene after the silence upstairs. Elias didn't step out. He only leaned close enough that his voice brushed my ear. "Think fast. Tomorrow everything changes." Then the doors closed and he was gone, leaving me among the noise and the heat and the life I thought I knew. But I couldn't focus on trays or glasses anymore. His words, her warning, Cassian's command, they spun inside me, tightening into a knot that refused to loosen. I already knew my answer, and that terrified me most of all. Dawn crept over the city in pale gray strokes. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice, the certainty with which Cassian Vale had said tomorrow. By the time the sun clawed above the skyline, I already knew there was no turning back. My shift ended without me remembering a single tray or dish. The walk home felt shorter than it ever had, the streets blurred by the fog of my thoughts. My apartment smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. In the bedroom, my mother stirred, coughing softly, before falling back into a restless sleep. Her hair had thinned from treatment, her skin fragile, but her chest still rose and fell steady. I sat at her bedside, watching her, weighing the choice I'd already made. If Cassian Vale could keep her alive, then what right did I have to refuse? By evening, a black sedan waited outside my building. Its windows gleamed impossible to see through. A driver in a dark cap stepped out, nodding once. "Miss Flynn." I hesitated at the curb, my suitcase small enough to look pathetic against the polished car. "This is... for me." "Yes," he said simply. The trunk swallowed my suitcase whole. I slid into the back seat, the leather too soft, the air too clean. The door shut, and the city outside became a blur of lights and shadows as we pulled away. The drive stretched long. The city gave way to wider roads, then to iron gates flanked by stone pillars. They rose like sentinels, silent, immovable. The gates parted as though the car's presence alone commanded it, and the sedan rolled into darkness. The estate revealed itself piece by piece, a sweep of manicured lawns, hedges cut with mathematical precision, fountains that whispered under the moonlight. At the center stood the house, or rather the mansion. Stone, glass, steel, windows like eyes glowing faintly against the night. The car stopped at the front steps. Two men waited, both dressed in suits, their posture too rigid to be mistaken for anything but security. The driver opened my door. My legs wobbled as I stepped out, my breath fogging in the cool air. One of the guards inclined his head. "Miss Flynn, Mr. Vale is expecting you." Inside the mansion was a cathedral of silence. Marble floors stretched in gleaming sheets, chandeliers glowed overhead staircases, spiraled upward into shadow. Every surface gleamed, but the air carried the faint scent of cedar and old stone. Elias appeared at the top of the stairs, his pace calm, his expression unreadable. "You came." I forced a smile. "Did you doubt I would—" "Always," he said, almost wry. "It's safer that way." He led me through corridors lined with paintings I didn't recognize. Landscapes, portraits, some so old their colors had bled into dusk. At last he stopped at a door and pushed it open. "This will be your room." I stepped inside. It wasn't what I expected. Not lavish, not overwhelming. A bed with crisp linen, a writing desk, a wardrobe, a small window overlooking the grounds. Neat, restrained, almost monkish. "You'll find clothes in the wardrobe," Elias said. "Uniforms for work, something formal for evenings. Meals are downstairs at set times unless Mr. Vale requires otherwise. You'll receive his schedule daily. And one more thing." He looked at me sharply. "Never wander the east wing. It's off limits." "Why?" His mouth tightened. "Because it's off limits." I wanted to press, but his tone left no room. Instead, I nodded. He left me, then the door shutting with a soft click. I sat on the bed, the linen cool beneath my palms. For the first time, the weight of it all settled on me. This wasn't a hotel. This wasn't temporary. This was a world with rules I didn't yet understand. I changed into the uniform, simple black slacks, a white blouse, no frills, and found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was pulled back, my eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but there was something else now. A thread of resolve I hadn't seen before. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Elias again, holding a folded slip of paper. Tonight's schedule. I unfolded it. A list of names, times, places, meetings, dinners. The last line chilled me. Midnight. Study. Private. Elias watched me read. "You'll be there." My throat tightened. Why me? He didn't answer, only inclined his head before disappearing into the hall. The hours crawled until midnight. I sat at the desk, listening to the clock tick, each sound louder than the last. Finally, when the hands aligned, I left my room and followed the hall to the study. The door was ajar. Light spilled into the corridor, warm and golden. I pushed it open. Cassian Vale sat behind a massive desk of dark wood papers spread before him. He looked up as I entered, his gaze steady sharp. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite. I did, folding my hands in my lap. He studied me for a long moment. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire. Finally he spoke. "You chose to come. That tells me more than words could." I forced a smile. Maybe I didn't have a choice. "There's always a choice," he said softly. "But not always a good one." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. "I don't need another servant. I don't need another shadow. What I need is someone who won't break when everything else does. Someone who can see through the smoke and still breathe." I frowned. Why me? His eyes glinted. "Because when I look at you, I don't see fear. I see defiance. Quiet, hidden, but there. Most people around me pretend they're not afraid. You don't bother pretending." My chest tightened. Maybe I'm just too tired to pretend. "That makes you useful." He slid a folder across the desk. The leather was smooth under my fingertips, the papers inside thick. I opened it and froze. My name, my address, my mother's medical history, debt records, rent notices, every corner of my life laid bare in ink. My hands shook as I closed it. "You had no right. I had every right," he said, his tone flat. "If I bring someone into my house, into my world, I know who they are. Every detail, every secret. I stared at him, my breath shallow. So this is what it means to work for you. No privacy. No escape. His gaze didn't waver. It means you're mine to protect, and mine to test. The fire cracked loud in the silence. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Do you want this life, Mara?" he asked quietly. I opened my mouth, but no words came, because I already knew the answer, and it terrified me more than anything else. Morning at the estate broke without sunlight. Heavy curtains swallowed the dawn, and the air carried a stillness that felt designed intentional. When I stepped from my room, the hush of the halls pressed against me like another set of rules I hadn't yet learned. I followed the muted sounds of clinking dishes until I found the dining hall. It was vast, too vast for the single place that had been set at the long table. Silver-gleamed napkins folded with soldier-like precision. Cassian Vale wasn't there. Of course not. At the far end, Elias stood waiting. His stance was straight hands behind his back, eyes sharp. "You're late," he said. I frowned. "It's barely 7. Mr. Vale wakes at 5. He expects the rest of us to adapt." Heat crept to my cheeks. Maybe he could have mentioned that. Elias's mouth twitched almost a smile. "He doesn't mention. He observes." I sat. A maid brought a plate, eyes fixed on the table as though I didn't exist. Eggs, toast, fruit cut into cubes. Each bite tasted like judgment under Elias's stare. I set my fork down. "Do you always watch people eat?" "Only when I'm deciding whether they'll last," he said. The rest of the morning blurred. Elias walked me through the estate as if conducting a lesson he'd taught 100 times before. He pointed out entrances, stairwells, offices. He showed me where I could go, and more importantly, where I couldn't. The East Wing. Always the East Wing. Every staff member I met regarded me with a careful distance. Some nodded politely, others whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. "She's with him now. That never ends well." By noon my legs ached. By evening my head throbbed. Elias kept moving, unrelenting. He seemed carved from discipline, his pace impossible to match. When at last he stopped outside the study, he gave me a look that cut through my exhaustion. "He'll want to see you now." I swallowed hard. What if I'm not ready? That's the point. The door was taller than it had been last night. I pushed it open. Cassian sat behind the massive desk, the fire flickering behind him. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood by the shelves, her gown crimson, her hair dark as midnight. I knew her instantly. The one from before. The one who warned me. Her eyes lit with cruel amusement. So the maid stayed. My breath stilled. Enough Seraphine. Cassian said, his tone like ice. Seraphine. The name felt dangerous on the air. She turned her sharp smile on him. "She deserves to know what you are. You don't keep people, Cassian. You break them. You always have." I wanted to ask, to demand, but the space between them pulsed with a history I couldn't touch. Cassian rose, his gaze steady. "Leave us." Her smile widened, slow and vicious. She brushed past him, perfume trailing like smoke, and paused just long enough to glance at me. "Enjoy your time, little maid. He'll make sure it's short." Then she was gone. The silence after her exit was thicker than stone. Cassian studied me. "She doesn't matter. She seemed to think she does," I whispered. He stepped closer. "Do you trust me, Mara?" The question hollowed me out. My pulse thudded. "I don't know." "Good," he said softly. "Trust given too soon is useless. What I want is loyalty. Loyalty earned. Loyalty tested. Tested how?" His gaze held mine unblinking. "Tomorrow. There's a gathering. You'll be there. You'll watch. You'll listen. And you will not flinch. No matter what you see." My chest tightened. "What kind of gathering?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past me, opened the door, and spoke over his shoulder. "Elias will prepare you." And then he was gone. That night I lay awake in the narrow bed that wasn't mine. Seraphine's words pressed against me. His words pressed harder. Consume. Test. Gathering. Fear twisted with something darker. Something like curiosity. Because beneath the warning, beneath the threat, lay the same question I couldn't push away. What kind of man needed me at his side, and what would I see tomorrow that would decide if I stayed or ran? The next evening arrived too quickly. Elias brought a dress to my room. Black silk, cut sleek and simple. Nothing like the servant's uniform I had worn before. "Why this?" I asked, running my hands over the smooth fabric. "Because tonight you're not a maid," he said. "You're something else." I didn't know what that meant. But when the clock neared 8, Elias returned to escort me. My heels clicked against marble as we moved down the endless hallways. The mansion pulsed with unusual energy lights, brighter voices muffled but urgent security stationed at every door. The double doors to the great hall opened, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. The room was transformed. Chandeliers blazed like constellations, tables glistened with crystal and silver. Men in tailored suits and women draped in jewels filled the air with laughter that felt too sharp, too brittle. The scent of wine perfume and money hung heavy. At the center, Cassian Vale stood like gravity itself. He didn't need to raise his voice or command attention. The crowd curved toward him as if by instinct. His eyes swept the hall, caught mine, and for a second the noise dimmed. "You'll stay close," Elias murmured at my shoulder. So I did. Cassian's presence was overwhelming even when silent. He spoke with measured ease to investors, to politicians, to faces I recognized only from headlines. They leaned in when he spoke, laughed when he allowed it, and glanced nervously when his gaze shifted. I carried no tray, no dishes yet. I felt more exposed than I ever had at the gala. Every so often eyes flicked toward me, assessing, wondering. Who was I to stand at Cassian's side? Halfway through the evening the air shifted, the laughter dulled. A man approached broad-shouldered silver hair, slicked back his smile too sharp. The crowd parted for him like water. "Vale," he said smoothly. Cassian's jaw ticked, but his voice was calm. "Donovan." I didn't know the name, but I felt the weight in it. Donovan's gaze slid toward me, lingering just long enough to raise goosebumps. "And who is this?" he asked. His tone feigned casual but edged with curiosity. Cassian's hand brushed the small of my back, barely a touch but enough to steady me. "Mine." he said simply. The words stole my breath. Murmurs rippled. Donovan chuckled low and dangerous. Brave of you, Vale. You never were one for attachments. Cassian didn't answer. His stare alone was enough to end the exchange. Donovan moved on, but the shadow of his smile lingered in my chest like a bruise. The rest of the night blurred. Toasts were made, deals whispered behind glasses of wine, alliances sealed with nothing more than a nod. And always I stayed at Cassian's side, silent, watching, listening. It was near midnight when the true test came. The crowd thinned some, slipping away into dark cars beyond the gates. Cassian led a smaller circle of men and women into a side chamber, a room heavy with smoke and secrets. A table waited stacked with folders, contracts, maps. Cassian gestured for me to stand behind him. My palms slicked with sweat, but I obeyed. The meeting began. Voices sharpened. Numbers, shipments, territories, all spoken in veiled words, but clear enough in intent. This wasn't about charities or corporations. This was power raw and unvarnished. At one point, Donovan leaned forward, tapping ash into a crystal tray. You can't hold it all, Vale. Not forever. Pieces slip, people turn, even those closest. His eyes flicked toward me. My stomach knotted, but I held still. Cassian didn't glance back, didn't waver. Pieces don't slip if you choose them carefully. The silence that followed was louder than any gunshot. I realized then what this was. Not just a meeting, not just business. This was theater. Every word, every gesture a test not just of Cassian's hold on them, but of me. How I stood. How I reacted. When the meeting finally ended, I felt carved hollow. The crowd dispersed, their faces carved in shadow, their whispers trailing down the hall. Cassian remained seated, pouring himself a drink, his movements deliberate. Only when the door shut on the last of them did he finally speak. You didn't flinch. My breath hitched. I wanted to. But you didn't. His eyes lifted, catching mine. There was something almost like approval in them. Good. I shifted my knees weak. What would have happened if I had? He downed the drink in one swallow, the glass clinking against the table. You'd already be gone. The words sank like stone. He rose then, crossing the room until he stood before me. He didn't touch me, not quite, but his presence pressed against me all the same. Understand this, Mara, he said softly. Every person in this house, every man in that room, they're waiting for weakness. The second they see it, they'll devour you. And I won't stop them, because if you break that easily, you were never meant to stand here. My throat closed, and if I don't break, his eyes darkened, unreadable, then you'll see how far this life really goes. For a moment, neither of us moved. The fire cracked. My heart thundered. And in that silence, I understood tonight had been only the beginning. Later, back in my room, I peeled off the silk dress and stared at my reflection. My face looked pale, drawn, but my eyes had changed. No longer just fear. Something harder gleamed there now. Seraphine's warning echoed in my head. Donovan's smirk haunted me. Cassian's voice lingered deepest of all. Not a maid, not invisible, something else. I lay awake until dawn, listening to the house breathe around me, knowing the next part of my life had already begun, whether I was ready or not. The mansion didn't sleep after the gathering. It only shifted, settling into a different kind of silence, the heavy sort that followed storms. I woke late, my body sore, as if the night's tension had left bruises beneath my skin. When I dressed and stepped into the hall, Elias was already waiting. He looked as though he hadn't closed his eyes once. "You lasted," he said flatly, studying me from head to toe. "Was I supposed to collapse?" "Most do." His tone carried no humor. He began walking, forcing me to match his long strides. Veil pushes. He waits. He watches. "If you hadn't kept your head, you'd have been out before dawn." I shivered, though the corridor air was warm. Out as in... "Sent away." Elias stopped, turned and pinned me with a stare that stripped away my bravado. "Out as in gone." "Don't ask again." The words chilled deeper than I wanted to admit. The day blurred with duties that felt like distractions, shadowing staff, learning schedules, memorizing names. But everywhere I went, whispers followed. "She's the one Vale chose. How long until she disappears? Poor girl." It was Seraphine who found me first. I'd slipped into the library at dusk, grateful for the quiet rows of books, the scent of paper and dust that felt almost human. She was already there, draped across a leather chair like a queen, a glass of wine in hand. "You play the part well?" She drawled, her eyes gleaming over the rim of the glass. Silent, steady, unflinching. "No wonder he likes you." I froze by the doorway. "I didn't come here to spar." She laughed softly, a dangerous sound. "You should know Mara. Everyone here is sparring, whether you admit it or not." I crossed the room, forcing my steps to stay even. "Why warn me then? Why not let me fail?" Her smile curved like a blade. "Because it's more entertaining to watch you realize what you've become. You think survival is victory. It isn't. It's only the first cage." The words bit deeper than her tone. I turned away, scanning the shelves, but her gaze burned against me until I fled the room altogether. That night, Cassian summoned me again. The study glowed with firelight, his silhouette sharp against the flames. He didn't rise when I entered. "You've caused talk," he said simply. I clenched my hands to hide the tremor. "I didn't speak a word." "You didn't have to." His eyes glinted. "Surviving makes noise." I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. "What did last night prove to you that you can be shaped?" His voice was low, deliberate. "You held your ground when they tried to rattle you. You didn't falter when Donovan baited you." "That's rare." I swallowed. "And if I had failed?" He leaned back, his face half-shadowed. "Then you'd be gone and we wouldn't be having this conversation." The bluntness stung, though I'd already known the truth. He rose then, crossing the space between us with a quiet grace that made the air tighten. "You're beginning to understand what this place demands. Good. But don't mistake endurance for power. You're here because I allow it. Never forget that." His words coiled like chains, yet beneath them pulsed something else. A recognition, a strange respect. I met his gaze steady despite the storm inside me. And what happens if I endure long enough? For the first time, his expression flickered, unreadable. Then, with a faint curve of his lips, he stepped past me and ended the conversation without an answer. The following days tested me in quieter ways. Donovan's men visited the estate under the guise of business, their smirks lingering too long. Staff whispered louder when I passed. Seraphine appeared in doorways only to vanish before I could confront her. Through it all, Elias watched. He corrected my posture when I carried files, reminded me to lower my voice in the halls, warned me never to linger near certain doors. He never explained why, only repeated the same phrase. Because it's off limits. One evening, as we crossed the east corridor, I paused by a locked door. A faint sound seeped through something between a whisper and a hum. My skin prickled. "What's in there?" I asked softly. Elias's hand closed firmly around my arm, steering me away. His tone was sharp. "Don't ask questions you aren't ready to have answered." The warning lingered long after the door disappeared from sight. When Cassian called me again, the summons came not through Elias, but through a god, brusque and unsmiling. The study was darker this time, the fire unlit. Only a single lamp illuminated the desk, casting long shadows. Cassian stood by the window, his silhouette stark against the night beyond. "Do you regret it?" he asked, without turning. "Regret? What?" "Staying." The question caught me off guard. My pulse stuttered. "Sometimes." He turned then, and the intensity of his gaze struck me like a blow. "Good. Regret means you understand the cost. But you're still here. That tells me you understand the reward, too." I shook my head. I don't understand anything about this world. A flicker of something amusement maybe passed over his face. "Then you'll learn, or you'll break." He moved closer, each step deliberate, until he was only inches away. "Tell me, Mara, when they looked at you last night, when they questioned you, when Donovan tried to rattle you, what did you feel?" The truth slipped out before I could stop it. Fear and anger. His lips curved faintly. "Both are useful. Fear keeps you alive. Anger gives you teeth. If you can master them, no one will touch you." The air between us burned with the weight of his words. I couldn't look away. Then just as suddenly he stepped back, his voice cool again. "You'll stay close to me from now on. Closer than before. If they see you as mine, then you will act as mine. Every glance, every word, every silence, you'll play the part." My chest tightened. "And if I refuse?" He studied me for a long moment, then spoke softly, almost kindly. "You won't." The certainty in his voice both terrified and thrilled me. Later in my room, I stared at the ceiling until dawn. Cassian's words replayed, weaving into Seraphine's warnings, into Elias's silences, into Donovan's smirk. Something was shifting. I could feel it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was being pulled deeper step by step into a world that might never let me go. And the worst part was a piece of me no longer wanted to leave.